It was a crisp autumn morning in French Lick, Indiana. The kind of morning where memories float like leaves in the wind, carrying stories of glory days and championship rings. But on this particular day, a different kind of story was about to unfold, one that would remind us that sometimes the greatest victories happen far from the bright lights of the arena. The morning sun cast long shadows across the weathered sidewalks of the small town as Damian Wells set up his modest display of basketball memorabilia on a street corner. His hands, once steady enough to sink game-winning shots, now trembled slightly as he arranged signed photographs and faded jerseys on a rickety card table. Each item told a story of his playing days, memories he was now forced to part with due to circumstances beyond his control. Life had taken unexpected turns for the former NBA player. The roar of the crowd had long since faded, replaced by the quiet whispers of passers-by, who occasionally stopped to browse his collection. Some recognized him, others simply saw an aging man selling pieces of basketball history on a street corner. The glory days of packed arenas and championship games seemed like a lifetime ago. Damian adjusted his worn leather jacket against the morning chill, his mind drifting back to the days when he and Larry Bird had faced off on the hardwood. They weren't close friends, but there was always that mutual respect that existed between rivals who pushed each other to be better. Now, 20 years later, their paths couldn't be more different. As the morning traffic began to pick up, Damian's thoughts were interrupted by the occasional curious onlooker. He'd smile, share a story or two about the items they picked up, and hope for a sale. Each piece he sold felt like letting go of a small part of himself, but necessity had a way of making difficult choices easier to bear. "That's from the '86 season," he'd explained to an interested teenager, pointing to a particular photograph. "Back when the game was different, when we played with our hearts on our sleeves and left everything on the court." The young fan would listen politely, but Damian could see that these stories belonged to a different era, one that felt increasingly distant with each passing year. The morning wore on, and the foot traffic remained steady but unspectacular. Damian had learned to measure success differently now. A good day wasn't about scoring points anymore. It was about making enough to keep the lights on for another month. His pension helped, but medical bills had a way of eating through savings faster than anyone could have predicted. Around noon, a familiar car slowed as it passed his corner. Damian barely noticed it at first, too focused on reorganizing his display. After a gust of wind had scattered some loose photographs, the black SUV made a U-turn at the next intersection and pulled up to the curb nearby. Damian's attention remained on his task until a shadow fell across his table. "Still got that quick release, Wells?" a voice asked, thick with Indiana drawl. Damian's hands froze mid-motion. He knew that voice. Everyone in basketball knew that voice. Slowly, he looked up to find Larry Bird standing before him, hands in the pockets of his casual jacket, expression unreadable beneath the brim of his baseball. Yet time seemed to stand still as the two former rivals locked eyes. In that moment, the years seemed to melt away, and they were back on the court, competing for rebounds and trading shots. But reality quickly reasserted itself, and Damian felt the weight of his current circumstances even more acutely. "Larry," he managed, straightening up. "Been a while." Bird's eyes scanned the table, taking in the carefully arranged memorabilia. Pieces of their shared history laid out for sale like common trinkets. His expression softened almost imperceptibly, but Damian caught it. He'd spent enough time studying Bird's face across the court to recognize even the slightest change in his demeanor. "Quite a collection you've got here," Bird said, picking up a photograph that showed them both in their prime, battling for a loose ball. "Remember this game?" "How could I forget?" Damian replied, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. "You hit that impossible shot in the fourth quarter after you blocked my first attempt," Bird finished, nodding. "You always did make me work." And for it, the conversation flowed naturally, as if the years between their last meeting had dissolved. They talked about old games, mutual teammates, and the way the sport had changed. But beneath the casual reminiscing, Demean could sense Bird taking in the full picture of his situation. Other passers-by began to notice who was standing at the modest card table. Phones came out and whispers spread along the sidewalk. Bird seemed to notice too, and something in his expression changed, a decision being made. "Why don't you pack this up?" he said finally, gesturing to the display. "Let's grab some lunch, my treat." Demean hesitated, pride warring with the reality of his situation. "I appreciate it, Larry, but I need to—" "Wasn't really asking," Bird interrupted, already beginning to help gather the items. "Besides, we've got some catching up to do." As they packed the memorabilia into Damien's old car, more people gathered to watch. Bird handled it with his characteristic blend of politeness and privacy, signing a few autographs, but making it clear that this was personal business. Over lunch at a quiet local diner, the conversation turned more serious. Bird listened as Demean reluctantly shared the series of events that had led him to selling his memories on a street corner. The medical bills, the failed investments, the family obligations. It was a story all too common among former players who had faced challenges after their playing days ended. "You know," Bird said after a while, pushing his empty plate aside, "I'm putting together something new. A program for former players, helping them transition into coaching and scouting roles. Could use someone with your eye for talent." Demean set down his coffee cup, studying Bird's face for any sign of pity. He found none, just the same competitive gleam he remembered from their playing days. "You don't have to do this, Larry. I'm not looking for charity." "Charity?" Bird scoffed. "You think I forgot how many times you made me look foolish on the court? This isn't charity, Wells. This is business. I need people who understand the game, who can spot raw talent and help develop it. People who've been there, done that, and learned from it all, good and bad." The offer hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Demean thought about his table on the street corner, about the pieces of his past he'd been selling off one by one. He thought about the dignity this opportunity represented, not just a paycheck, but a chance to stay connected to the game he loved. "Take some time to think about it," Bird said, reaching for the check. "But not too much time. Season's starting soon, and we've got work to do." As they walked back to their cars, Bird paused. "One more thing," he said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a check and held it out. "For the memorabilia, all of it. These pieces belong in a museum, not on a street corner." Demean looked at the check, then back at Bird. "Larry, I can't—" "You can, and you will," Bird insisted. "Consider it an investment in your future. Use it to get back on your feet, then come show me what you can do with this program. The game gave us both a lot, Wells. Time to give something back." As Bird drove away, Demean stood on the street corner, where his table had been just hours before. The check in his hand represented more than money. It was a bridge back to the world he thought he'd lost forever. But more than that, it was a reminder that sometimes the greatest assists happen off the court. The story spread quickly through the basketball community and beyond. For some, it was just another tale of Larry Bird's legendary generosity. But for those who understood the game, who really understood it, it was something more. It was a story about respect, about recognizing value in someone when they'd forgotten it themselves, about reaching across the years and rivalries to lift up a fellow player. That evening, as Demean sat in his small apartment looking at the check and Bird's business card, he realized that sometimes life's greatest plays don't end up on any highlight reel. They happen in quiet moments, on ordinary street corners, when one person recognizes another's struggle and decides to do something about it. The morning had started with him selling pieces of his past. It ended with him looking toward the future, reminded that in basketball, as in life, The game isn't over until the final buzzer sounds, and sometimes, just sometimes, the best comeback stories start with a simple act of kindness from an old rival. The next morning dawned with a different kind of heaviness for Damian Wells. The check from Larry Bird lay on his modest kitchen table, untouched since yesterday. Its amount substantial enough to solve his immediate problems, yet something kept him from depositing it. A complex mixture of pride, uncertainty, and the lingering echo of his father's voice about never taking handouts. His small apartment, filled with the remaining pieces of his basketball legacy that he hadn't yet sold, felt different now. The worn basketball in the corner, the few framed jerseys he'd kept for sentimental reasons, the stack of playbooks from his coaching attempts. They all seemed to watch him, waiting to see what he'd do next. Damian poured himself a cup of coffee, his morning ritual unchanged despite the life-altering opportunity presented to him. The local news played quietly in the background, and he caught snippets of sports coverage, young players signing million-dollar contracts, living the dream he once knew. The contrast between their fresh-faced optimism and his current situation wasn't lost on him. His phone had been buzzing since yesterday afternoon. Word traveled fast in basketball circles, and Larry Bird showing up at a street corner wasn't the kind of thing that stayed quiet for long. He'd ignored most of the calls, but one voicemail from his old teammate Roman Vale caught his attention. "Wells, pick up the damn phone," Roman's familiar voice crackled through the speaker. "Bird's offer is legitimate. This program he's putting together, it's real. Don't let your pride get in the way of this one, brother. Call me back." Damian set the phone down and walked to his window, looking out at the town he'd called home for the past decade. French Lick had always been Bird's territory, but somehow he'd found his own peace here. The locals knew him, respected his privacy, and generally let him live his life without too much fuss about his past glory days. The morning crowd moved along the sidewalk where his table had stood just yesterday. A few people glanced at the empty corner, probably wondering where the former NBA player and his memorabilia had gone. The story would make its rounds, he knew. Small towns had a way of turning everyday occurrences into legend. His reflection stared back at him from the window, gray threading through his temples, lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship. He wasn't old, not really, but the game had a way of aging you differently. Every jump, every fall, every collision left its mark, not just on the body, but on the spirit. The sound of knocking at his door pulled him from his thoughts. Opening it, he found Lyra Stone, his neighbor, and one of the few people who treated him like a normal person rather than a fallen star. She worked at the local high school as a basketball coach, and they'd developed a friendship based on their shared love of the game. "Heard about yesterday," she said, holding up a paper bag that smelled of fresh pastries. "Thought you might need someone to talk to who isn't going to blow sunshine up your backside about the good old days." Damian couldn't help but smile, stepping aside to let her in. Lyra had a way of cutting through the noise, of seeing things clearly when others got caught up in the mythology of professional sports. "Word travels fast," he said, getting another coffee cup from the cabinet. "In this town, a butterfly sneezes and 3 people write a country song about it," she replied, setting out the pastries. "But this is different, Damian. This is Larry Bird himself reaching out." They sat at his kitchen table, the check still lying there between them like a silent challenge. Lyra looked at it, then at him, her expression serious. "You're thinking about turning it down, aren't you?" Damian sighed, running a hand over his face. "It's complicated." "No, it's not," Lyra countered. "You're making it complicated. What's really eating at you, Wells? The money, the opportunity, or is it something else?" The question hung in the air as Damian gathered his thoughts. Outside, a group of kids passed by, their basketball bouncing on the sidewalk, their laughter carrying through the window. When "I was playing," he started, his voice low. "Everything made sense. The court, the game, the rules, it was all clear. But this, taking help from someone who used to be a rival? Starting over at my age? It feels like admitting defeat," Lyra finished for him. "Something like that." Lyra leaned back in her chair, studying him with the same intensity she used when analyzing game footage with her team. "You know what? I tell my girls, the strongest players aren't the ones who never fall. They're the ones who know how to get back up, even if they need a hand doing it." Her words struck a chord, reminding Demean of countless moments in his career when teamwork had made the difference between victory and defeat. But this felt different, more personal, more fundamental to who he was. The morning wore on as they talked, diving deeper into the reality of his situation. Lyra listened as he shared his fears about the program, about working under Bird, about facing the basketball world again from a different angle. She didn't offer empty reassurances or try to minimize his concerns. Instead, she asked questions that made him think, that forced him to examine his resistance from new angles. "Remember Eden Locke?" she asked suddenly. The name triggered a memory. Eden had been one of Lyra's players, a talented girl who'd almost quit basketball because she thought accepting a scholarship was like admitting her family couldn't afford college. "She's starting point guard at State now," Lyra continued, "because she learned that accepting help isn't weakness. It's smart. It's strategic. It's knowing that sometimes the best play isn't the one you make alone." The parallel wasn't lost. On Demean, he looked at the check again, seeing it differently now, not as charity, but as a strategic play, a veteran player creating an opportunity for a new kind of victory. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Bird himself. "Time's ticking, Wells. Team meeting tomorrow morning. Be there or don't, but make the choice for the right reasons." Lyra stood up, gathering her things. "You know what I think? I think Larry Bird didn't show up yesterday because he felt sorry for you. He showed up because he saw value in your experience, in your understanding of the game, in everything you've learned since the spotlight faded. The question is, do you see it too?" After she left, Demean sat alone with his thoughts. The morning had grown into afternoon, sunlight shifting across his kitchen table, across the check that represented more than money. It represented a choice between holding on to pride and reaching for possibility. He picked up his phone and dialed Roman's number. His old teammate answered on the first ring. "About time, Wells. Tell me you're not about to do something stupid." Demean looked at the check one last time. "No," he said finally. "I think I'm about to do something smart. Tell me more about this program." As he listened to Roman explain the details, Demean felt something shift inside him. The weight of pride that had been holding him down began to feel more like the familiar weight of a basketball in his hands. Something he knew how to handle, something he could use to propel himself forward. Later that afternoon, he walked to the bank, check-in, and each step felt like part of a new game plan, a different kind of strategy than he was used to. The teller who helped him was professional, but he caught the flash of recognition in her eyes, the slight smile that suggested she'd heard about yesterday's events. As he left the bank, he passed the corner where his table had stood. A group of young basketball players were there now, practicing their moves, dreams of future glory in their eyes. One of them attempted Bird's famous fadeaway jumper, missing badly, but laughing it off. Demean stopped to watch them for a moment, seeing in their joy the pure love of the game that had started him on this path so many years ago. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dynamics to navigate, but for now, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. The anticipation of stepping onto the court, metaphorically speaking, with a clear mind and purpose. His phone buzzed one more. Time. A text from Lyra. "Made your decision yet, coach?" He smiled at the title, typing back a simple response. See you at the high school games. Might have some scouting to do." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street, but for the first time in years, Damian Wells wasn't standing in anyone's shadow but his own. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring, but today he'd learned that sometimes the biggest victories come disguised as moments of surrender, and that true strength often lies in knowing when to accept the assist. The conference room at Bird's training facility felt worlds away from the street corner where Damian had been selling memorabilia just 2 days ago. Morning light streamed through wide windows, illuminating a space that perfectly balanced modern amenities with old-school basketball sensibilities. The walls displayed a carefully curated collection of historical moments in the sport, and Damian couldn't help but notice that one of them featured him guarding Bird in the playoffs. He'd arrived 30 minutes early, a habit from his playing days that had never quite left him. The room was empty, except for Cyrus Bellamy, another former player he recognized from the late 90s, who nodded in quiet acknowledgement. They shared the comfortable silence of two professionals who understood the weight of this moment. As other former players began filtering in, Damian observed each entrance, noting familiar faces and bodies that, like his, had changed with the years. Elias Kane limped slightly, an old injury that had ended his career early. Asher Doyle still carried himself with the confidence of a shooting guard, though his hair had gone completely gray. Each person who entered the room represented a different chapter of basketball history, a different story of life after the final buzzer. Larry Bird arrived exactly on time, carrying a stack of folders and wearing the same focused expression Damian remembered from countless games. He moved to the front of the room with purpose, setting his materials down on the conference table. "Morning, gentlemen," Bird began, his voice carrying the same Indiana drawl that had become famous in press conferences and interviews. "Appreciate you all being here. What we're about to discuss isn't just another retirement program or charity initiative. This is about the future of basketball and your role in shaping it." The room sat up straighter. Bird had always had that effect, the ability to command attention without raising his voice. "Each of you," he continued, "has something unique to offer. Experience that can't be taught in coaching clinics or learned from watching film. You've lived this game, felt its highs and lows, understood its evolution from the inside. That's what we need." As Bird outlined the program, Damian found himself leaning forward, increasingly engaged. This wasn't just about scouting talent, it was about mentoring, about creating a bridge between generations of players, about preserving the soul of the game while embracing its future. "Wells," Bird said suddenly, making Damian snap to attention, "you'll be working with our youth development program in French Lick. Your experience with both offense and defense makes you uniquely qualified to spot versatile talent." The assignment made sense. French Lick was home, and working with young players had always been something Damian enjoyed, even if he'd never pursued it formally. After the initial briefing, they broke into smaller groups for detailed discussions. Damian found himself sitting with Everett Stone and Felix Mercer, both former players who'd successfully transitioned into development roles. "The hardest part," Everett was saying, "is learning to see the game differently. We're not looking for who's good now. We're looking for who could be great with the right guidance." Felix nodded in agreement. "You've got to unlearn some things too. What worked in our era might not be what these kids need today. The game's evolved." Damian absorbed their insights, already mentally applying them to what he'd seen at local games. He thought about the kids he'd watched playing on his corner, their raw energy and unrefined talent. During lunch break, Bird pulled him aside. They walked through the facility's hallways, past practice courts and training rooms. "Had a chance to deposit that check?" Bird asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Yesterday," Damian replied. "Thank you again for everything." Bird waved off the gratitude. "You know why I really started this program?" He paused, looking through a window where some young players were practicing. "Because I saw too many good men struggling after their playing days. Not just financially, mentally, emotionally. The game gives us so much, but it also takes something, creates a void when it's gone." Demean understood perfectly. The void had been his constant companion these past few years. "But it doesn't have to be that way," Bird continued. "There's always a place in basketball for people who truly understand it, who respect it, who can pass on not just the skills, but the heart of it." They watched the young players for a moment longer. One kid attempted Bird's signature move, and both men couldn't help but smile. "Speaking of passing things on," Bird said, reaching into his pocket. "Got something for you." He handed Demean a business card and a key. "Office is down the hall. You'll need somewhere to review game footage and meet with prospects." Demean stared at the key, its weight in his hand feeling significant. His name was already on the card: Damian Wells, Youth Development Coordinator. The afternoon session focused on practical matters, schedules, responsibilities, protocols. But Damian's mind kept returning to that key, to what it represented. This wasn't just a job offer or a helping hand. It was an invitation back into the world he loved, approached from a new angle. As the day wound down, the group began to disperse. Some headed to their hotels, others to homes nearby. Demean lingered, walking through what would be his new workplace. He found his office, small but efficient, with a view of the practice courts. Lyra called as he was leaving the facility. "How'd it go?" she asked, the sound of bouncing basketballs in the background, suggesting she was at practice. "Different than I expected," Demean replied, walking to his car. "Better, actually. This isn't just about staying involved in basketball, it's about making it mean something new." "Told you so," she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "My team's having a scrimmage tomorrow. Want to come by? Get some practice with that talent evaluation?" Demean agreed, already thinking about how to apply what he'd learned today. As he drove home, the sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, reminiscent of countless evenings spent in gyms and arenas across the country. He passed his old corner, now occupied by a street musician. The sight no longer filled him with the same heaviness it had just days ago. Instead, he felt a growing sense of purpose, of possibility. At home, he pulled out his old playbooks and coaching notes, spreading them across his kitchen table. But now he looked at them with new eyes, seeing not just strategies and plays, but opportunities to connect, to teach, to guide. His phone buzzed with a text from Bird. "First youth tournament this weekend. Be ready to take notes. These kids might not know who you are yet, but they will." Demean smiled, thinking about how life had a way of coming full circle. He'd started his basketball journey as a kid with dreams, moved through the heights of professional success, hit rock bottom selling memories on a street corner, and now found himself in a position to help shape the dreams of a new generation. He pulled out a fresh notebook and began writing, starting with a simple header: "What to look for." Below it, he listed not just physical attributes or technical skills, but the intangibles he'd learned to recognize over his years in the game. Heart, determination, the ability to learn from failure, the willingness to be part of something bigger than yourself. A knock at his door interrupted his writing. It was Cyrus from the meeting. "Few of us are grabbing dinner," he said. "Thought you might want to join. Talk about old times, new beginnings." Demean grabbed his jacket, realizing that this too was part of the transition. Building new connections, sharing experiences, creating a community of those who understood both the glory and the struggle of life in basketball. Over dinner, listening to stories and sharing insights with his new colleagues, Demean felt the last pieces of his resistance falling away. This wasn't an ending or a handout. It was a new chapter, one he was uniquely qualified to write. Later that night, he stood at his window again, looking out at the town that had seen him at his lowest and would now witness his revival. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove himself in this different role. But for the first time in years, he felt ready, not just to participate, but to lead, to teach, to give back to the game that had given him so much. The basketball in the corner of his room caught his eye. He picked it up, feeling its familiar texture, and smiled. Some things never changed: the weight of the ball, the sound of it bouncing, the way it could bring people together. But some things did change, and sometimes that change was exactly what you needed. The high school gymnasium buzzed with the familiar symphony of squeaking sneakers and bouncing basketballs as Demean settled into the bleachers, notebook in hand. Lyra's team was warming up, and he found himself automatically analyzing their movements, seeing potential in their raw athleticism. His first week as youth development coordinator had been a whirlwind of activity. Bird's program was more comprehensive than he'd initially realized, touching every level of youth basketball in the region. Today marked his first official scouting assignment, though he'd chosen to start with Lyra's team, a comfortable entry point into his new role. August Klein, a fellow scout he'd met during orientation, joined him on the bleachers. "Heard good and things about the point guard," August said, nodding toward a tall girl practicing three-pointers. "Celeste Quinn," Demean replied, consulting his notes. "Junior. Been watching her since she was a freshman. Good instincts, better work ethic." The game began, and Demean found himself falling into a natural rhythm of observation. His years of playing experience translated well into identifying promising talent. He noticed things others might miss: the way one player anticipated passes, how another maintained composure under pressure, the subtle leadership qualities shown during timeouts. During halftime, Lyra approached the bleachers, her team heading to the locker room behind her. "Well?" she asked, wiping sweat from her brow. "Seeing anything interesting?" Demean nodded, showing her his notes. "Your team's got something special brewing. Especially that play you ran in the second quarter. Haven't seen that kind of creativity at this level in a while." Lyra smiled, pride evident in her expression. "Learning from the best," she said, gesturing to his notebook. "Some of those plays might look familiar to anyone who watched you back in the day." The comment caught him off guard. He hadn't realized he'd been incorporating elements of his own playing style into his analysis. Looking back at his notes, he could see it now: the emphasis on fluid transition plays, the appreciation for unconventional defensive strategies. As the second half began, Demean found himself increasingly engaged. He wasn't just watching the game, he was seeing the future of basketball unfolding before him. These young players, with their mix of old-school fundamentals and new-age athleticism, represented everything Bird's program was about. Between plays, his mind wandered to the meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. Bird wanted preliminary reports on local talent, and Demean had spent hours preparing his observations. The responsibility felt different now, watching these young athletes chase their dreams on the hardwood. Celeste made a particularly impressive play, threading a no-look pass through 3 defenders. The crowd erupted, and Demean made another note. August whistled low beside him. "That's the kind of thing you can't teach," August said. "Either they have it or they don't." "Disagree," Demean replied, surprising himself with his conviction. "You can teach anything if you understand how they think, what motivates them. That pass, she's been practicing that during lunch breaks. Lyra told me she comes in early every day to work on her court vision." The game continued, with Lyra's team pulling ahead in the fourth quarter. Demean watched as Celeste managed the clock, made smart decisions, kept her teammates involved. It reminded him of his own early days before the spotlight, when basketball was pure joy and possibility. After the game, as the crowds filtered out, Demean stayed behind. He watched as the janitor began his routine, the same way he had countless times after his own games. There was something poetic about it, the way a basketball court transformed from an arena of competition to just another room to be cleaned, only to become a battlefield again the next day. His phone buzzed with a text from Bird. "Got your preliminary report. Good eye, Wells. Tomorrow's meeting. Bring your thoughts on development programs. Time to think bigger." The message sent a spark of excitement through him. He'd been generating ideas all week, drawing from his own experiences both as a player and during his tough times. Who better to guide young talent than someone who'd seen both the heights and depths of the game? Lyra emerged from the locker room, gym bag over her shoulder. "Want to grab coffee? Talk about what you saw?" They ended up at the local diner, the same one where Bird had made his offer just over a week ago. The symmetry wasn't lost on Demean. "You know," Lyra said, stirring her coffee, "watching you during the game, it was like seeing someone come back to life. You've got that look again." "What look?" "The one that says you know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it." He considered her words, thinking about how different everything felt now compared to just days ago. The weight of selling. His memories on the street corner had been replaced by the purposeful responsibility of helping shape basketball's future. "Bird's giving us a lot of latitude with this program," he said. "It's not just about finding talent, it's about developing it the right way, teaching them not just how to play, but how to last." Lyra nodded, making sure they don't end up selling memorabilia on street corners. He finished with a self-deprecating smile. "Exactly." They spent the next hour discussing the game, the players, the possibilities. Demean shared his ideas for a mentorship program, pairing experienced players with promising youth. Lyra offered insights from her coaching perspective, helping him refine his concepts. As they were leaving the diner, they ran into Celeste and her family celebrating the victory. The young player's eyes widened with recognition, not of Demean, the former NBA player, but of Demean, the scout who'd been watching the game. "Mr. Wells," she said, her voice carrying the earnest hope of youth, "did you see the game?" "Every minute," he replied. "That pass in the third quarter, that's the kind of play that makes people take notice." Her face lit up, and for a moment, Demean saw himself at that age, full of dreams, hungry for validation, eager to prove himself. It crystallized everything about his new role, about why Bird had chosen him for this position. Later that night, as he prepared his notes for tomorrow's meeting, Demean found himself adding a new section to his report. Beyond the technical evaluations and potential assessments, he wrote about the intangibles, the fire in Celeste's eyes, the way her teammates responded to her leadership, the hours of hidden practice revealed in moments of brilliance. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Roman. "Heard you're making waves in the development program. Bird's impressed. Keep it up, brother." Demean set the phone down, looking at the collection of notes spread across his desk. Each page represented not just observations, but opportunities, chances to help young players avoid the pitfalls he'd encountered, to build something sustainable beyond their playing days. Tomorrow's meeting would be about more than just scouting reports. It would be about creating a framework for success that extended beyond the court. As he organized his materials, Demean realized he wasn't just helping these young athletes chase their basketball dreams. He was helping them build foundations for their entire lives. The night deepened, but Demean kept working, energized by purpose. On his wall, the framed jersey he'd kept served as a reminder not of past glory, but of the journey that had brought him here. Every victory, every defeat, every moment of doubt had prepared him for this new chapter. He was no longer just a former player or a cautionary tale. He was becoming something else, a bridge between generations, a guide for young talents, a guardian of the game's future. And somehow, that felt bigger than any championship ring. Dawn broke over the training facility as Damien arrived for the morning meeting, his detailed reports tucked under his arm. The familiar scent of hardwood and leather basketballs filled the air, mixing with the aroma of fresh coffee from the break room. Through the windows, he could see Everett Stone already on the court, working with a small group of early morning players. Bird's conference room was set up differently today. Instead of the usual formal arrangement, the tables had been pushed into a circle, creating an atmosphere of collaboration rather than presentation. As other coordinators filed in, Damien noticed the energy was different, more focused, more purposeful. "All right," Bird began once everyone was settled. "Wells, you're up first. Show us what you found." Damien stood, distributing copies of his report. He'd spent hours organizing his observations, not just about individual players like Celeste, but about patterns he'd noticed in youth development across different levels of play. "We're seeing something interesting in the local programs," he started, his voice steady with conviction. "These kids aren't just playing basketball, they're studying it. They're watching NBA League Pass, breaking down plays on YouTube, sharing analysis on social media. They understand the game differently than we did at their age." He pulled up footage he'd captured from recent games, including clips from Lyra's team. "Look at this sequence," he said, freezing the frame on Celeste's no-look pass. 10 years ago, this would have been considered showing off. Now it's fundamental court vision, developed through hours of studying film and practicing visualization. The room leaned forward as Damien walked them through his observations. He showed how modern players were combining classical fundamentals with new school creativity, how social media was influencing their approach to the game, and most importantly, how they were learning to think about their futures beyond basketball. "That's where we come in," he continued, reaching the heart of his presentation. "These kids need more than just skill development. They need guidance on how to build sustainable careers, whether in basketball or beyond it. They need to understand that the game is a vehicle, not just a destination." Bird nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "You're talking about a complete overhaul of youth development." "I am talking about evolution," Damien corrected respectfully. "The same way the game evolved from peach baskets to alley-oops. We need to meet these players where they are, while teaching them where they could go." He outlined his proposal for a comprehensive development program that would combine traditional coaching with life skills, training, financial education, and career planning. Each point was backed by examples from his own experience, both the successes and the failures. Asher Doyle raised his hand. "This is ambitious, Wells. Resources?" "Already worked that out," Damien replied, flipping to the budget section of his report. "We can partner with local businesses, former players, educational institutions. The community wants to invest in these kids' futures. They just need the right framework." The discussion that followed was intense, with coordinators debating various aspects of the proposal. But there was an underlying current of excitement, a sense that they were on the verge of something important. During a break, Bird pulled Damien aside. "You've put a lot of thought into this. Had a lot of time to think about what I wished someone had told me," Damien replied. Bird's expression softened slightly. "Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who've learned the hard way." He paused, looking out at the practice court where young players were starting to arrive for morning workouts. "Get this program outline finalized. I want to pilot it here in French Lick." The rest of the morning was a blur of planning and coordination. Other coordinators began integrating their own insights into Damien's framework, building something larger than any one person's vision. Felix Mercer offered his expertise in digital training techniques, while Cyrus brought valuable connections with educational partners. By lunch, what had started as Damien's proposal had evolved into a collaborative blueprint for the future of youth basketball development. The energy in the room was electric, reminiscent of the buzz before a championship game. As they broke for lunch, Damian's phone lit up with a message from Lyra. Celeste's been asked to participate in a national showcase. Your report helped make that happen. The news hit him differently than he expected. Instead of just satisfaction at helping a talented player advance, he felt a deeper sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about identifying talent anymore. It was about nurturing it, protecting it, helping it grow in the right direction. The afternoon session focused on implementation details. Damian found himself working closely with Everett and Felix, mapping out the first phase of the program. They were interrupted by a commotion from the practice court. Celeste had arrived for an informal workout, and her presence seemed to energize the entire facility. Think about it, Felix said, watching through the window as she worked with younger players, naturally falling into a leadership role. A year from now, she could be helping run this program, showing other kids the way forward. The comment sparked something in Damian's mind. He began sketching out an addition to their plan, a peer mentorship component that would create a continuous cycle of development and support. As the day wound down, Bird called another meeting, this time with just the core team. We're going to fast-track this, he announced. Wells, you'll head up the pilot program. Full resources, full support. Show us what this can become. The responsibility was enormous, but Damian felt ready. More than ready, he felt energized in a way he hadn't experienced since his playing days. This wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was about legacy, about transformation, about creating something that would outlast all of them. Walking to his car that evening, Damian passed the court where Celeste was finishing her workout. She was teaching her signature pass to a younger player, breaking down the mechanics with natural patience and insight. Looking good, he called out. Keep developing that teaching touch. You might need it sooner than you think. She grinned, understanding the implication. Mr. Wells, thanks for seeing something in me. The moment stuck with him as he drove home, past the corner where his card table had stood just weeks ago. That spot no longer represented rock bottom. It marked the beginning of something bigger than himself. At home, he spread his notes across his kitchen table, adding new ideas that had emerged during the day. His phone buzzed periodically with messages from other coordinators, each adding their own insights and suggestions to the evolving plan. Looking at it all, Damian realized that this was what Bird had seen in him that day on the street corner. Not just a former player down on his luck, but someone who could transform personal struggle into universal wisdom. Someone who could help bridge the gap between basketball's past and its future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to refine and improve the program. But tonight, watching the sun set over French Lick, Damian Wells felt the full circle of his journey, from player to cautionary tale to pioneer of a new approach to youth development. He picked up his phone and typed out a message to Bird. Thank you for seeing the bigger picture. We're going to change lives. The response came quickly. No, Wells, you're going to change lives. I just opened the door. You're the one walking through it and bringing others with you. The gymnasium at French Lick Community Center was packed to capacity, an energy pulsing through the crowd that reminded Damian of playoff games from his past. But today wasn't about professional basketball. It was about the future of the sport, embodied in the 100 young players gathered for the launch of the comprehensive youth development program. 3 months had passed since that pivotal meeting, and what had started as an idea had grown into something remarkable. Banners hung from the rafters announcing the Next Generation initiative, while stations were set up around the court for different aspects of the program: skills development, academic support, financial literacy, and career planning. Damian stood at center court, microphone in hand, looking out at the sea of eager faces. Parents filled the bleachers, many of them wearing expressions that mixed hope with curiosity. Among them, he spotted Lyra, who gave him an encouraging nod. Basketball, he began, his voice steady and clear. is more than just a game. It's a doorway to possibility. Each of you here today isn't just learning how to play, you're learning how to build a future. As he spoke, he caught sight of Celeste Quinn, now serving as one of the program's first peer mentors. She stood with a group of younger players, already showing the leadership qualities they'd identified months ago. "Look to your left, look to your right," Demean continued. "These aren't just your teammates or competitors. They're your network, your support system, your future colleagues. We're not just building players here, we're building a community." The RCC day's schedule unfolded with precision, each station offering a unique perspective on athletic and personal development. Everett Stone ran the skills clinic, while Felix Mercer handled the technology integration aspect, showing players how to use video analysis tools effectively. At the financial literacy station, Roman Vale shared hard-learned lessons about managing success and planning for the future. "The game will give you opportunities," he told the attentive young athletes, "but what you do with those opportunities is up to you." Demean moved between stations, observing, adjusting, ensuring everything ran smoothly. He paused at the career development section, where successful professionals from various fields, many former athletes themselves, shared their experiences of transitioning beyond basketball. During lunch break, Bird made an appearance. Characteristically, understated but impactful, he didn't make a speech or draw attention to himself. Instead, he sat with small groups of players, asking questions, listening intently, offering quiet wisdom. "This is exactly what the game needs," Bird told Demean as they watched the afternoon sessions begin. "Not just training bodies, but building futures." The afternoon brought a surprise that Demean had carefully planned. Several NBA scouts arrived, not just to evaluate talent, but to participate in a panel discussion about the realities of professional basketball. They spoke honestly about the odds, the challenges, and the importance of having backup plans. "Success in basketball isn't just about making it to the NBA," one scout explained. "It's about using the lessons of the game to succeed in life." As the day progressed, Demean found himself drawn to a quiet corner of the gym, where Celeste was working with a shy young player who had been struggling with confidence. "You know," he overheard her saying, "Mr. Wells once told me that every great player started as someone who was willing to learn. It's not about being perfect, it's about being persistent." The moment hit him hard. His words, filtered through Celeste's experience, were already helping shape another young player's journey. This was how legacy worked, not through championships or statistics, but through the ripple effect of shared wisdom. Late afternoon brought a scrimmage, but not a typical one. Teams were mixed across age groups and skill levels, with peer mentors integrated throughout. The focus wasn't on scoring, but on communication, leadership, and support. Demean watched from the sidelines as players who had been strangers that morning now worked together, encouraged each other, and demonstrated the principles they'd been learning all day. The game wasn't just a game anymore, it was a laboratory for life skills. After the final whistle, as families began gathering their things and players exchanged contact information, Demean felt a tap on his shoulder. It was Cyrus Bellamy, who had flown in specifically for the launch. "Well, Wells," he said with a smile, "looks like you've started something special here." Looking around the gym, Demean had to agree. The energy was different from any basketball event he'd ever been part of. There was excitement, yes, but also purpose, direction, and hope. Parents approached him throughout the wrap-up, sharing stories of how their children had been transformed just in the preparation for this program. One mother, tears in her eyes, explained how her daughter had started taking school more seriously once she understood the connection between academic success and athletic opportunity. As the crowd thinned, Demean walked to his old corner, the spot where Bird had found him selling memorabilia. The card table was long gone, but something new had taken its place. A billboard advertising the youth development program featuring a photo of Celeste teaching younger players. His phone buzzed with messages from coordinators across the country, asking about implementing similar programs in their regions. What had started in French Lick was already beginning to spread. Lyra joined him as he stood looking at the billboard. Pretty different view from this corner now, huh? Everything's different, he replied, but somehow exactly right. They watched as the last few cars pulled away from the community center, carrying young athletes who had arrived that morning as basketball players and left as something more, participants in a larger vision of what sports could mean. Back in his office later that night, Demean added notes to the program guide, incorporating observations from the day. His wall now held photos of the program's first participants, including one of Celeste working with her young protégé. A text from Bird appeared. "This is just the beginning, Wells. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start expanding." Demean looked out his window at the darkened court below, thinking about all the lives that would be touched by what they'd started here. He thought about the street corner where he'd hit bottom and how that moment had led to all of this. Sometimes he realized you had to lose everything to find your true purpose. Sometimes the game had to end before you could understand what it was really all about. He picked up his old basketball, worn smooth by years of use, and placed it on a shelf beside his new program guide. Together, they told the story of where he'd been and where he was going, a story that was now helping write the future of basketball itself. The lights of French Lick twinkled outside, and somewhere out there, hundreds of young athletes were dreaming new dreams, armed with tools and wisdom he wished he'd had at their age. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to grow and improve the program. But tonight, Demean Wells sat in the quiet of his office, feeling the full weight of what they'd accomplished and the lightness of knowing that this was exactly where he was meant to be. 1 year later, Demean stood in the same gymnasium, but everything felt different. The Next Generation initiative had grown beyond anyone's expectations, spreading to 30 cities across the country. The proof of its success wasn't just in the numbers, it was in the stories, the transformations, and most importantly, the lives changed. Celeste Quinn, now a freshman on a full scholarship at a Division I school, had returned to help with the program's anniversary celebration. She moved through the gym with confidence, her presence a testament to what the initiative could achieve. But it wasn't just her basketball success that made Demean proud. It was her commitment to mentoring, her understanding that success meant lifting others as you climbed. "Remember this time last year?" Lyra asked, joining him at the observation window overlooking the main court. "You were so nervous your hands were shaking. Different kind of pressure now," Demean replied, watching as another group of young players filed in for the day's sessions. "Back then, we were hoping it would work. Now we know it does. We just have to keep it growing right." The gymnasium had been transformed into a showcase of the program's comprehensive approach. Each station told a story of evolution, not just in basketball skills, but in life preparation. The financial literacy corner now featured success stories from former participants who had started small businesses or secured internships. The career development section had expanded to include virtual mentoring sessions with professionals across various industries. Bird arrived early, as he always did for major program events. He and Demean walked the facility together, observing the morning preparations. "You've built something special here, Wells," Bird said, pausing to watch a group of young players practicing visualization techniques. "Something that's going to outlast all of us." The day's events began with a ceremony honoring the first year's successful participants. Among them was Zane Whitaker, a former streetball player who had transformed into a promising coach through the program's leadership training. He now ran similar initiatives in 3 other cities. When Mr. Wells found me, Zane told the assembled crowd, I was just playing for today. Now I'm building for tomorrow, helping others find their path through basketball, just like he helped me. The morning sessions focused on the program's expanded curriculum. Former participants, now successful in various fields, led workshops sharing their journeys. Everett Stone, who'd been skeptical at first, now ran the program's national training coordination. It's not just about basketball anymore, Everett explained to a group of visiting program directors. It's about creating a support system that stays with these kids long after they leave the court. During lunch, Demean received news that made the day even more significant. The NBA had officially recognized the Next Generation Initiative as a model program for youth development, pledging support to expand it nationwide. The announcement came with funding that would allow them to reach thousands more young athletes. But it was the afternoon session that truly showcased how far they'd come. The gym filled with current and former participants, their families, and community leaders. Demean watched as Celeste took center court, now leading a session on balanced life management for young athletes. Success isn't just about what you achieve, she said, echoing words Demean had shared with her a year ago. It's about what you build, what you share, and how you help others achieve their dreams. The day's events included a special recognition ceremony for the program's pioneers. As Demean called names and handed out certificates, he saw not just individual success stories, but the beginning of a legacy. Each participant represented a branch of influence, reaching out to help others as they had been helped. Late afternoon, he brought a unique scrimmage, a game between current participants and program graduates with a twist. Each play had to demonstrate a principle taught in the program, from teamwork to financial planning, translated into basketball metaphors. As darkness fell outside, the gymnasium remained alive with energy. Families lingered, sharing stories and making connections. Young players clustered around mentors, eager for advice and encouragement. The scene was everything Demean had envisioned and more. Bird found him again as the event wound down. "Remember that street corner?" he asked. "Every day," Demean replied. "Reminds me why we do this." "That corner's gone now," Bird said. "They're building a youth basketball center there. Seems fitting, don't you think?" The symbolism wasn't lost on Demean. The spot where he'd hit bottom would become a place where young athletes could build their futures. It was more than poetic justice. It was proof that rock bottom could become a foundation. As the last families left the gymnasium, Demean walked the court one final time. The squeak of his shoes on the hardwood echoed in the empty space, but the energy of the day lingered. He stopped at center court, where just 1 year ago he'd stood nervous and uncertain. His phone buzzed with a message from Roman. "You did it? Hey, brother, you really did it." But Demean knew it wasn't just him. It was every person who had believed in the program, every young athlete who had embraced its principles, every mentor who had shared their wisdom. It was Bird seeing potential where others saw failure, Lyra offering support when doubt crept in, and countless others who had helped transform an idea into a movement. Looking up at the banners now hanging from the rafters, not championship banners, but testimonials to lives changed and futures brightened, Demean felt a different kind of pride than he'd ever known as a player. This wasn't about personal glory or individual achievement. This was about creating something that would continue growing, touching lives long after he was gone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to expand and improve. But tonight, standing in the quiet gymnasium where it all began, Demean Wells understood that sometimes the greatest victories don't come with trophies or medals. They come in the moments when you realize you've helped others find their way, just as others once helped you find yours. The lights dimmed automatically. leaving him in the soft glow of emergency fixtures. As he walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the empty space, he smiled, knowing that tomorrow this court would again fill with young athletes, each carrying dreams that now had a better chance of becoming reality. And somewhere out there, on another street corner in another town, someone else might be at their lowest point, not knowing that help and hope were on the way. Because that's what the Next Generation Initiative had become. A reminder that in basketball, as in life, it's not about how many times you fall, but how many people you help up along the way.